Humans of the Cardboard, Rhoda is a very famous card. In fact, this card just existed, and then it became so famous eventually that we now just refer to other cards as Rhodas. Any spell card that searches another card from deck to hand, we just kind of call a Rhoda. So that's what we're doing today. This is a top 10 list of the best Rhoda cards. Of course, barring Rhoda, we're not including Reinforcement of the Army itself. This card adds any level 4 Lore Warrior from deck to hand, not once per turn. Insanely broken card. It's still at 1 on the ban list. You get the idea. So keep in mind, this list is my opinion here. I got to like the final 20 to 25 search spells, and it became very tough to really whittle it down to a final 10. So just take that for what it is. There are a handful. In fact, let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know what Rhoda-esque spell card that you think deserved to be on this list that I didn't have here, and what you would take out for it. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down below. But let's just get into this thing. Let's get rolling. Starting off with number 10. This is in a loose order, by the way, as well. So I kind of worked my way up into what I believe are the most insane search spells of all time. Starting off number 10, Small World. I think this is a newer one, and I have a feeling that a lot of people won't be as willing to kind of come around to this card just yet. I think the basis of this card is that realistically, the biggest difference between this card and every other card on this list, this card literally searches every single monster in Yu-Gi-Oh! Essentially, more or less. There are monsters with question marks, attack, and defense. I don't think you can technically search those with this. But anything other than that, pretty much this card can search it. And I think because it has that realm, I think this card deserves a spot in the top 10 because it can connect any deck into any monster in the game. And as we get further into the game, we get monsters where even if you go -1 to resolve this card, technically, the card you're getting is so strong because we're just moving further and further along in Yu-Gi-Oh! That you make up that value and then some, and it still becomes absolutely worth it. We're seeing this card see more and more play as it's been out longer and longer. I think it's definitely a card that deserves to be on this list. Moving on, Preparation of Rites. This is one that's almost didn't make the list, but I kind of just decided to respect the genericness of this card. The fact that it does add any ritual monster in the entire game, and even has the bonus of being able to get a ritual spell back as well. I decided to respect it. I know ritual is the weakest mechanic. You can't call it an extra deck mechanic, but if you include all the extra mechanics and then throw ritual in there, it's by far the weakest one, even though we've seen some successful ritual archetypes come out of here. This is one of the reasons why, and there's even generic engines like Illusion of Chaos into Magician's Souls that this card allows be more consistent. It really is a good card overall. Mikanko is another good example. Yeah, so I just think the genericness of this card, being able to access an entire mechanic, essentially pretty much searching any monster in a certain type, is really what it does, and I'm choosing to respect it. I know it's hit or miss. It's not in every ritual deck, but it is a really, really good card. It's not once per turn. That's a huge factor for me, and so I decided to include the list, this card on the list, but it was one of the ones that was on the chopping block at the end. Moving on, number 8. Trickstar Light Stage. This is another one I'm kind of partial to, and maybe part of it is when I started playing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! For the very first time, it was during a formats where Trickstar was kind of in its prime. But, the deck's cool. This card is quite strong. Couple things. Non-once per turn. Adds burn damage for an archetype that tries to whittle you down with burn. And locks back row. It literally, inherently playing versus any deck that sets cards, gives you a way to play second. In the grind game, it locks back row and just completely turns things off. It is a really strong card, especially when you factor in that it's a non-once per turn card that's included in an archetype that has insane factors to it, such as Droll Lock Reincarnation combos is insane. So I put it on here. This was another one where there were a couple of archetypal field spells that I was kind of going back and forth between, but I ended up going with Trickstar Light Stage. Moving on, number 7, Dragonic Diagram, another one, insane. Again, non-once per turn, big factor for me. It's at 1 still on the ban list because Konami clearly thinks it's too strong. I do think this card could probably come off the ban list, but the fact that it's been to this point still speaks to its power. Yes, it you have to give up a card to kind of get your search, so it's not really a ++1, but it destroys the card. So there are a lot of combinations with being able to combine this card with other archetypes to get extra value off of what you're popping. That's really, really cool. The fact that, and then after that, it's a very potent protection, kind of like board, you know what I mean, like towers adding tool, like control-y tool, where that all your monsters are kind of gaining more stats and they can't be destroyed by battle, pretty much taking, you know, clearing them in the battle phase away from your opponent as an option to kind of handle your board is very, very nice. And another difference here, a lot of the cards on this list only search once. This card is just a main phase search. So every single turn you pop a card, search, pop a card, search, pop a card, search. Whereas most of these cards are you fire it once, it goes to grave. Even if it stays on field, you fire it and it's on activation, so you can't use it again while it's face up. That's a huge, huge bonus for this card as well. I think it's crazy. I think it's really good, and I think it deserved to be on this list. Moving on, Magical Meltdown. This one's a little more standard. I mean, it is a hard once per turn. It activates, or it searches on activation. So you're losing kind of a lot of the bonuses that you get with like Diagram. But the extra bonus here is, you know, one of the most powerful things, why Super Poly is one of the most insane cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, and non-interactivity. You know, the fact that your opponent like cannot interact with you as you're doing your plays because of this card is insanely broken. And I think that's one of the most broken things in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is when we have cards like that. And the fact that this card is a +1, it's a 1-card play into a boss monster, while also giving you that level of protection is insanely, insanely strong. This card turns off multiple cards, specifically a lot of types of hand traps by itself. That's insanely good. So yeah, I think this card definitely deserved to be on here for sure. Moving on, I think this is number 5, Fossil Dig. Now hear me out. I think the one reason why Fossil Dig kind of fell a little bit for me when I finally, like when I really got into the nitty gritty of like analyzing this card, dinos are just like an underdeveloped type in Yu-Gi-Oh! There are some very, very potent cards, but there's not like this wide range of like awesome cards you can search. You got Ovi, you got Misk, and then I guess the babies, but like other than those, what do you really want to add to hand dinosaur-wise that's like level 6 or lower? There's not a ton of stuff. They don't have a ton of great extenders from hand. Dinos do. I mean, UCT's great, but this doesn't search him, so that doesn't really apply to us. Here, it has our few very potent targets, but aside from that, you know, that's kind of where we're at, and there's not even a ton of great dinosaur decks anyway. I gave Dinomorphia, but okay. So because this card kind of doesn't have the widest pool to search from, it kind of fell for me. Even though it's not once per turn, even though it's still very, very good and searches anything in a whole type, it still fell for me because of the pool being a little bit weaker relative to like Warriors, right? Rhoda being insane. But still very high on here. Still deserve to be in the top 10 for sure. And I'm still digging it. Get it? Okay. Number 4, Signet Mining. Another really good card. I know this is a hard once per turn and it discards, which Fossil Dig doesn't. But let's be honest, in modern day, discarding is not even the end of the world. There are times where like getting ashed on a card like this can hurt, depending on like what the rest of your hand is. But I think, again, accessing an entire type, monster type, that type is way more vast and has way more options than dinosaurs do. So you get a bump there. And the fact that this card is searchable by other means. This card is searchable off of Microcoder. It's now searchable off of Firewall Phantom, right? There are ways to search this card, which makes it even more insane. So it's really, really good. I think it just has a wider pool for it. This and Fossil Dig were close for me. I ended up leaning on this, and maybe that's part of my bias that I am a big Cybers fan, but you know, they were still close for me, and I still think this card deserves it just because Cybers is just such a wider pool of cards than dinos are. So it made it in there for me. Moving on, number 3, it's Tanky. This card has come up time and time again. I think the biggest thing you can say about this card, how many meta decks has this card been like a really big part of? Or not even just meta decks, but like literal best deck in the game. I mean, just off the bat, I can already think of 2, Tri-Brigade and Zodiac, this card was. an absolute staple in both of those. Very, very good. There's been other examples as well, you know, stuff like Luna Lights, you know, when they were back into the metagame. Like, there's a handful of decks this card has come up very, very high level meta for. I love the fact that it stays on field, even though you're not actually getting a ton more value from it. It is a card on field, which means generic cards that need to, like, send something. I mean, with Tri-Brigade, you would end up making double Dragon Lords, and it needs to send any card from hand or field. So this just becomes a free send off of that. That's just free value. You don't have to send an actual good card for it. You get to send, like, this dud card that's just, it's paying your cost for you, which is really nice. So I love that. I love this card. It's really cool, and it's come up a ton. So love that. I talked about the other two decks. I didn't even talk about, like, actual fire formation or oh my gosh, Brotherhood of the Fire Fist. The fact that deck was, like, a top tier meta deck when it came out, and this card was a nice piece for that, you know. Okay, moving on. I think we're in the final 2 slots here. Number 2, Nadir Servant. This one is definitely up for debate. You could argue some of those more generic ones we just talked about, the Nadir, or I'm sorry, the Fossil Digs, the Silent Minings, the Tankys could be above this card. I just think the bonus that this card offers is insane. So one, it's already searching Dogmatica card. Ecclesia is such a generically abusable card in so many strategies. Just put a extra deck monster on the field, it extends itself and then pluses you even further from that. But also the fact that you just get a send anything from extra is so broken. I mean, whether you're just sending Garua to draw one, whether you're sending a Shadal Apcolone to pretty much set up a Shadal Winda for your opponent's turn, very potent, right? Or, you know, whatever. There's a myriad of different cards you can send. Going second, Untis to pop a card. Really, really insane search card, in my opinion. I think it's one of the best ones I've ever seen because of that bonus utility is broken. And the fact that this card only locks you the rest of the turn after this card resolves means, even if you're talking about, oh, it locks you out of so much, but, like, if you're playing this in a combination with a deck that does use the extra deck, you just do all your extra stuff first, and this is the follow-up to that. To get you an extender, to get you more interaction, to still let you end on something or help you break a board. And I think it's insanely good in that role. I think it's one of the best search cards in the game. The bonus is just too good to ignore. I know it's once per turn. I know it's only really searching like 1 or 2 cards usually in the game, but they're potent enough. And then the utility you get from the send is just, it's insane. So I really respect this card. I think it's one of the best Rotas we've ever seen in the game, and I think it deserves to at least be in the top 10. Maybe you could argue not this high, but top 10 for sure. Which brings us to number 1. Nobody should be surprised by this. I think it's Engage. Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the bonus effect, yes, technically there's more utility to the bonus effect of the of Nadir, but the fact that this is non-once return, it's in an archetype that has a card like Kagari that can just add this back and use it again immediately, means that you could literally go like +3 off of this card at least. And that's when this card, and that's with this card at 1. Imagine the days when this card was at 3 and you could resolve this card 3+ times in a turn and literally go like +5 in that turn just from the engage, nothing else. Is absolutely bonkers. It's insane. The non-once per turn thing is what kills me the most. They could have easily just made this hard once per turn, made it like the only hard once per turn effect in the deck, and we would have been golden. Not golden, but like it would have definitely gone a long way in like making the deck feel way more fair. But yeah, it just is what it is. It's still at 1 on the ban list. That still speaks to this card's power. Konami still doesn't trust this card to come back because they're scared Sky Striker could take over again. I don't blame them. And yeah, I don't think there's too much debate here. I think a lot of people would agree that this is the best Rota of all time, barring Rota itself. So there you go. There's my top 10 list. Hopefully this hit you guys well. Like I said at the beginning of the video, let me know what you think missed the list first and foremost and what you would take out for it. I'd love to hear your guys' input on that and where you land on the power level of a lot of these Rota cards. But I'm out of here for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Let me know if you want to see more top 10 videos down the line. I'll see you in the next one.